Welcome to the last session of the second international conference of the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence fEUture, devoted to the future of Europe. For this last session, we have two speakers, Professor Antonella Galletti of Korea University at Enna, and she will speak about the Recovery and Resilience Facility to support the digital transition in EU member states, and Professor Francisco Pereira Coutinho of the Universidade Nova de Lisboa will speak about Between Atlanticism and Strategic Autonomy, Portugal Perspective on a European Defense Union. So thank you so much to our speaker, to the people connected, to the people here in Novedrate for participating in this conference. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Professor Antonella Galletti. We thank her for connecting. We know that she is having a problem, unfortunately, with her webcam, so we will only be able to hear her. But she sent us the slide for a presentation that I'll be sharing with you. So, Antonella, you have the floor.
Yes. Good morning, everyone, and thanks you, Roberto, for giving me for the second time this opportunity. As well, we know one of the key points of conference on the future of Europe contemplates the fundamental priority theme of digital transition. Digital technologies present enormous growth potential for Europe. The European Commission is committed to deliver a Europe fit for digital age by empowering people, business, and administration with a new generation of technologies where the digital transformation that will benefit everyone. Digital solutions that put people first will open up new opportunities for business, encourage the development of trustworthy technology, foster an open and democratic society, enable a vibrant and sustainable economy, help fight climate change, and achieve the green transition. The European Commission, by the technical support instrument,
Antonella, we lost your voice. Can you hear us?
States carry out reform to unlock digital growth potential and innovative solution for business and citizens, and to improve the accessibility and efficiency of public services. Digital technologies have a profound impact on our way of living and doing business. A systematic and forward-looking research and innovation strategy is crucial to a more productive and green economy. Member states need to have the capacity to reap the benefits of our increasingly digitalized society and face the challenges it brings. To shape Europe's digital future, the European Commission is determined to tackle the digital skills gap and promote projects and strategies to improve the level of digital skills in Europe. All Europeans need digital skills to study, work, communicate, access online public services, and find trustworthy information. Digital skills are a crucial driver of EU's competitiveness and innovation capacity. They are also a key determinant of social cohesion and personal well-being. Ongoing digital and green transformations bring fast economy restructuring, which requires people to engage in lifelong learning. Moreover, this transition requires member states to unlock their full skills and innovation potential. This includes reform to improve the quality of education and training system. The European Commission supports EU member states by providing expertise and exchange of good practices in the field of skills, education, and training. To make our societies and economies fit for the digital age, the EU is committed to creating a safe digital space for citizens and business in a manner that is inclusive and accessible for all. This means enabling a digital transformation that safeguards EU values and protects citizens' fundamental rights and security, while also enhancing Europe's digital sovereignty. Two key tools for achieving this digital transition are Path of the Digital Decade and the support from the Recovery and Resilience Facility for the digital transition in EU member states. Path to the Digital Decades is the EU policy program for the digital transformation. The program is structured around four areas: digital skills, digital transformation business, secure and sustainable digital infrastructures, and digitalization of public services. The Digital Decade Policy Program sets specific digital targets and milestones to be reached by 2030. To achieve these objectives, it includes an annual cooperation cycle involving the European Commission and member states, as well as a monitoring mechanism. The program heavily relies on large-scale projects which allow member states to pool resources and work together closely to build digital capacities they could not develop on their own. The multi-country projects facilitate investments in areas such as common data infrastructure, high-performance computing, blockchain services infrastructure, digital public administration, and high-tech partnerships for digital skills. Let's now analyze the second tool. The Recovery and Resilience Facility currently provides the largest EU funding for the EU's digital transition. Key initiatives in the current digital transition strategy include Digital Economy and Society Index, the digital agenda published by the European Commission entitled Shaping Europe's Digital Future, 2030 Digital Compass presented by the European Commission, and the Digital Decade Policy Programme 2030 adopted by the European Parliament and the Council. But what does the European Union Court of Auditors think about the implementation of the device? Think
Antonella?
about
Okay.
the special report support from the transition EU member states. The European Union Court of Auditors assessed the digital measures included in the national plans address the main digital needs that were previously. È staccato tutto. Mi sentite?
Ora sì di nuovo. Now we can hear you again.
Me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, okay.
For a few seconds.
Okay, okay. Okay.
You can start. You can speak again, Antonella.
Okay. What does the European Union Court of Auditors think about the implementation of the device? The European Union Court of Auditors assessed the digital measures included in the national plans address the main digital needs that were previously identified and make an effective contribution to the digital transition. They examined if its legal framework was consistent with the EU strategies for digital transition, ensuring that the digital measures included in the National Recovery and Resilience Plan address the main digital needs that were previously identified. For a sample of measures, they assessed their implementation and whether they are delivering this expected results. They also evaluated whether the plain performance framework provides a solid basis for measuring its contribution to the digital transition by using appropriate indicators to track progress. They found that some member states did not prioritize EU funding towards measures addressing their main digital needs. Furthermore, the plain's common indicators are not well aligned with those of the EU digital strategy, limiting their ability to measure the plane's real contribution to the digital transition. As a result, it lacked strategic focus, as the member states were not required to prioritize allocating these funds to measures that address the main digital needs that were previously identified. Thus, some member states devoted smaller shares of their plan funding to areas where they were underperforming, thereby reducing the potential to contribute to the digital transition effectively. They also find that the performance framework and indicator used for tracking progress were not well aligned with those of the EU's digital strategy, limiting their ability to measure the real contribution by these reforms and investments to the digital transition. They are also identified weaknesses in the final milestones and the targets, and the lack of proper result indicators. Overall, they conclude that the Recovery and Resilience Facility for the Digital Transition in EU member states contribution to the digital transition was a massive opportunity to address member states' main digital needs effectively. Based on their findings, they recommended the Commission, when proposing future instruments with a digital objective, should ensure that the funding schemes are required to address the main digital needs, and an adequate performance framework aligned with the EU's digital policy objectives is developed, and final milestones and targets for measure are substantially admission and guarantee their full completion. Thank you all for your attention, and I hope that my speech has been of help to clarify and deepen a very important issue such as digital transition with the Union.
Thank you, Antonella, for addressing this, which is one of the priority of the conference on the future of Europe, and indeed one on which there was a lot of proposal from the conference and a lot of work from the Commission, making one of the focus also of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, as you mentioned. It's scary what you said about the results of the Court of Auditors review of this, in terms of this being a missed opportunity to some extent for filling these digital transition needs by many member states. I wonder if you have some suggestions and ideas regarding what can still be done, because anyway, the digital transition remains one of the priorities of European Union policy making, together with the environmental transition and now European defense. This seems to be the three broad overall overarching priority. And as I know that you'll have to leave us soon, I'm really interested to understand if on the basis of your study on this subject, you see some path, some avenues that the European Union and the European Commission especially can try to follow to address these needs as pointed out by the Court of Auditors? So Antonella, if you can turn on the mic. Yes.
Yes. I believe that can you listen me? Oh, I think a little more responsibility is needed on the part of the member states.
Yes, sure. At the end of the day,
Not only by the European Commission, but by each member state in the Union is a necessary responsibility. I don't listen and think.
can you? Yes, okay. So thank you, Antonella, for this
Thank you.
for this reply. I would like to give the floor to Professor Francisco Pereira Coutinho from Universidade Nova de Lisboa, who will speak about between Atlanticism and strategic autonomy, Portugal's perspective on a European Defence Union, which is a topic we have one of the priority of the Conference on the Future of Europe, the Europe in the World and Security, and which we have already started to address also this morning and in the joint session with Bologna. So it's great that we can continue to discuss this and also with a specific perspective from Portugal. So Francisco, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Roberto, for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here at the campus personally again for the second time and talking about the future of Europe and this specific conference. It's really fortunate that we spend the morning talking about the Defense Union. And I will give some insights on what is, to me, the biggest challenge that we're going to face in Portugal with European integration in the coming decades. And it goes straight to a lot of things that you actually said in the morning regarding our relationship with the United States. And for my presentation to make sense, I need to give some reflections on the Portuguese identity and our specific history. And the issues that I will raise go straight to the nature of the Portuguese state, the identity of the Portuguese state, because Portugal has always been an Atlantic country, not so much an European country. Actually, we only looked at Europe after the revolution 50 years ago when we lost the empire. So in the Portuguese psyche, we were always facing the Atlantic, and that is still reflected a lot on the priorities on our external policy priorities to today. And that was very clear in our history. We basically always align with hegemonic maritime power. First, the United Kingdom. We were invaded by Napoleon because of that. Our king had to go to Rio de Janeiro, and we had basically to establish Brazil with our royal family there, and most of the nobility. That's what explains that Brazil has its size, and you just compare it to the Spanish empire and how it fragmented very quickly. We didn't, because of course the Portuguese state basically migrated to Brazil, and after the United Kingdom lost its own empire, we aligned with the United States very clearly. We were one of the founders of NATO in 1949. Although we were a dictatorship under Salazar, we tried to remain neutral during the Second World War, although there were very, very much big identities between the Portuguese Estado Novo and even the Italian fascist movement here. But it was possible to remain as an empire after the Second World War while we were in NATO. And of course, when we looked at Europe until the 21st century, we always had the problem that we are a small country in Europe and we have a big neighbor, one of the biggest European countries, which is Spain, and always have this hegemonic perspective towards the Iberian Peninsula. And of course, we looked at the Atlantic to remain independent. So, but of course, after 74, after the revolution, it became clear that the empire was gone. And that generation of Portuguese made the strategic move to actually go into the European Union. That became a national project also for Portugal. And that was not a big issue per se back then for a couple of reasons. One, the United Kingdom was part of the European Union. It was our historical ally in the European Union. And we basically joined in 1986 what was a federal economic union. And in defense matters, and I'm getting there, we were members of NATO, and our defense was outsourced to the United States. And for us, that was absolutely perfect, because if you look at our territory, it's mostly maritime territory. We have one of the biggest EEZs, one of the biggest continental shelves in the world, and it's just there in the middle of the Atlantic. We don't have the resources to protect all of that, but of course, we are halfway the Azores to New York. It's a natural air carrier between Europe and the United States, and Portuguese foreign policy always was very much connected to that. And of course, when we didn't discuss defense matters in the EU, it was just perfect for us. It was the best of two worlds. We could remain European and Atlantic exactly at the same time. So there was absolutely no problem. But of course, we know what the geopolitical situation is right now. And for me, this makes us have to do at some point this existential choice, which is to decide whether we remain an Atlantic country or an European one. Of course, right now it's theoretical, but we already have some hints of what that specifically means. And I will give two examples. One was in 2003, where we organized the summit that led to the Iraq War. We had a huge fraction in Europe between the United Kingdom and us, basically, and the Spaniards were there. That was odd. And then the big EU countries, Italy, France, and Germany, against that specific military intervention, and Portugal, who had very little to say. But it was very, but the government went forward, saying, of course, we are going to back the United States, even if this is an intervention that breaches international law, because they are allies, and we are an Atlantic country, and we go where the US actually goes. So that was one example where it became very clear that when we had to discuss our European alliances or the Atlantic ones, where did we stay? And the second one was, it's even more interesting, and it shows how much this question is complicated for Portugal. We joined in 1986, and we were considered to be the good student from the start. And that basically was the result that we always want to be on the front run of every EU policy. We needed to be there. We even tempered our public accounts to be part of the euro as the Greeks, because it was a national objective. We had to do everything to be in the first level of European integration. If we are going to have an Europe on different speeds, we have to be in the front wagon of that specific train, and that happened in every EU policy. For instance, we are part of Schengen from the start as well. Monetary policy, you name it. If European integration is going forward, Portugal was always there in the front running wagons of that specific train, except in defense. We were discussing PESCO during the first Trump mandate, and we were the last to get into PESCO. And and the reason is why. Actually, if you go and check I went to check the parliamentary debates about PESCO, and we had this unholy alliance between the extreme left, the far left, who is against any kind of defense and militaristic project, and the sovereign right and the right in general. And they basically said that we will not be part of PESCO because PESCO is the embryo of an European army. That was the discussion. And we have a minority government with the socialists, and they had to actually explain for many months that what PESCO was all about increasing our capabilities in the defense field, and nothing else than that. So that was already a hint of what could happen if we go forward with the defense union, because all the discussions will be back again, because the discussion with PESCO was we cannot accept, this will completely go against our identity to choose Europe in the defense field, because that would mean to forfeit our Atlantic and American allies. And of course, the situation only got worse since 2017, and because back then there was really not a need to make any choice between Europe and America, but apparently things are getting clearer right now. And there will come a point, I guess, where you really have to make some serious choices here. But of course, this will explain why Portugal will always be a laggard here. It's not, of course, Ukraine is very far away. We are in the periphery of Europe. The situation is not so alarming for the Portuguese people. That can explain a part of the equation. But that also happens with the Spaniards. But for us, again, the question is more conceptual and goes straight to the identity of the state. And if you go and check the discussions we had during the negotiations of the Lisbon Treaty, when we were discussing specifically the role of NATO, Portugal was very clear and said we won't accept anything that jeopardizes this idea that European defense has to be vertebrated through NATO, for NATO countries, of course. And that was very clear, and all the Portuguese delegation said that from the start, because it allows us from the start to get the best of two worlds, right? Having the United States inside Europe, defending Portugal, and the United States for us is a country next door from our borders. But I think that time is up. It's not going back. Biden was probably the last Atlanticist president. And of course, we've been trying. I'm very critical of what we've been doing in the last year, trying to keep the Americans close, getting this very humiliating tariff agreement because of this geopolitical situation that we're in. But I believe that's only patches to a problem that will not be solved. Because I guess the United States have changed their priorities, and they are mostly focused on Asia and not so much on Europe. And I spent a few months in the United States last year, and it's very clear that the Ukraine war is not even an issue on media. So I understand why they don't want to get involved on what is specifically an European issue. So for Portugal, I do think that this creates, I believe, the only possibility where I see a discussion about port exit, the possibility that Portugal will leave the European Union, because honestly, it makes sense to ask the Portuguese people what do they want exactly at some point. This will probably happen. Because the consequences are severe, even for the integrity of Portugal. Because of course we do have a huge connection with the European Union since the accession in 1986. We are, according to Eurobarometer, one of the most enthusiastic with European integration. The Portuguese people, people associate Europe with economic progress. That's very clear. But things would also change there, because if we enlarge the European Union, we're going to contribute more than we get from the EU, and that changes a bit the way that the mindset of the Portuguese people toward Europe has been until now. And also for the integrity of the state, this will become very problematic at some point, because if NATO collapses, which is a possibility, and we go forward with the European Defence Union only, and especially with the United Kingdom outside the European Union, then we're going to see most likely secessionist movements in the Azores. We saw them in 74 and 75 when there was this possibility that the communist movements could actually succeed in the Portuguese Revolution. We saw some secessionist movements in the Azores, in the islands. So that would be a possibility if we're not in NATO in the future. But again, my point here is that one of the reasons why we don't see Portugal as a front runner specifically in this topic is because it goes against every foreign policy doctrine that everybody has written about. And it's really interesting. And if I went to check what my colleagues that work specifically in this field have been writing for the past three decades, and they say, all of them say the same. And it's like this doctrinal theory that is enshrined in stone, that doesn't move. And I do believe that this is time to actually start talking about this specific topic, because I think things are changing dramatically, and for us this really creates a point of friction with European integration. But I do believe, and I was listening to what you were saying in the morning, it's inevitable right now. So it's probably time to start telling people how things will evolve in the future, because this arrangement that we had, and it worked very well for us until now, it's going to be problematic. So this idea of strategic autonomy, which I agree, because if I would vote in the referendum, I would vote for Europe most certainly, is something that creates a lot of issues with a lot of people in Portugal, because they really understand, and I understand why they don't want to lose that Atlantic ethos of the Portuguese state. And of course, national identities, they're all constructed, created. That's true, but I have my compatriots, they learn in school that we are an Atlantic country. That's what they learn for the history. The whole history program, 95% is about those specific topics. So it becomes very difficult to change this entrenched ideas, and to tell them that actually, and there were some Portuguese scholars, especially Francisco Lucas Pires, his name is in the library of the European Parliament, and one of the things he wrote was, no, European integration is great. It's one of the ways so that we can actually protect ourselves from the Spaniards, because if we stay outside, then the problem will be much worse. And of course, we could only leave Europe if we had another possibility, either with the UK or with the United States. I don't know what the plans of the United States are, but when we see them actually projecting themselves over Greenland, there is no reason why they shouldn't project themselves over the Azores. It's basically in the same geographic area that they want to project their new empire. So, so for us, that would be an issue as it is for the Danes. But I do believe that the way to preserve our independence is by staying in the European Union, as the Catalans have understand very well, because they want to be independent inside the European Union, never outside the European Union, because they know what that specifically means. So I don't see a problem there. But given the discussions that I saw with PESCO, I think this is a time bomb that's there. And it's going to explode when we understand finally that NATO is probably dead and we are on our own. And of course, many. This is highly hypothetical. Many variables are at stake here. It depends a lot on what the United Kingdom wants to do, which is not very clear, not even for them. And the way that European integration will actually evolve from here. But for us, and that was basically my point, all these discussions, and that's why I titled my presentation "The Portuguese Perspective." I wanted to give my 5 cents to a discussion that is for me very, very interesting, but at the same time very problematic for the future of the Portuguese state and our interpretations of what Portugal actually is. And in the end, I would say it will be for the people to actually have a say on wherever they want to decide they want to stay in this political integration in Europe or in the Atlantic. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about this.
Thank you, Francisco. I think that it was very interesting. You touched upon many different things that are crucial, because at the end of the day, basically you explain us why defense is so essential for the state. And of course, I mean, one of the difficulties when we discuss about European defense is precisely that defense is a crucial element of sovereignty, and defense is very closely linked to the history and the identity of the country. So what you emphasize, identify regarding Portugal is really interesting. I'd like to pose you a couple of questions. The first one regards the fact that if in Portugal there is a debate with regards to the fact that US have abandoned Europe and therefore Portugal as well. Because I think that the whole debate about European defense has been accelerated by the Trump administration pretty clear stand that they want to disengage from Europe. This started with Obama pivot to the Pacific 16 years ago, but now there is a final say that we have said that we are doing it, and now we are doing it. And I wonder if there is a debate with this regarding this aspect of the a change that we have not chosen. It was not a European decision, the US disengagement. So the second issue is about how to defend yourselves without the Americans. Because you mentioned the possibility of going with the UK. But the UK is a small country in the global at the global level, is a country in a very difficult situation following Brexit from all perspectives. Just in these days, there was the Financial Times or The Economist with the title that the UK is crumbling and they are upset with themselves for all kind of issues. And in fact, their own estimates suggest that Brexit has caused a dramatic decline in GDP growth, jobs, everything. I mean, we knew the literature about it was basically unanimous that Brexit was going to have terrible results for the UK, but it did. And so economists were right for once. And so it's difficult to decide to go under a British umbrella, let's say, also because the nuclear deterrence of the UK is not autonomous. It depends on the US, unlike the French one. So if the US are disengaging, it means that the UK doesn't have a nuclear umbrella anymore either, because to use their nukes, they need the US approval. So is there a debate in Portugal regarding these issues? Or is more of hoping not to have to decide that things may change and the old times may come back.
It's the second option completely. This is not the first time I do this talk specifically, and people, they just look at me and say, "What are you talking about? This is not gonna happen. NATO will stand, Europe will stand, and things will keep up as they are." But unfortunately, I think you agree they're not. So yeah, but my point is the following. Yeah, I agree. The United Kingdom is the sick man of Europe, as it was before the accession. That's why they actually went into the EU to try to find a way to cure their malaise in the 70s. No, so I do believe they are struggling. But my point is the following. I don't know if you thought about this, but if we are really not going back where we were, that means we are going to a different place, right? In international relations, geopolitics. So if we are going back to an age of empires, so we're going to protect a big one, which is the United States, either protecting their space to Canada, to the Greenland, possibly to the Azores. Well, where will they stop? Next is us, right? So we are the border. Very clear. Portugal set the border there between the United States and Europe. And since you are saying that there is this entanglement, then Europe has to protect itself. And we were talking yesterday at dinner. I told you that Cape Verde is very interested in receiving us. Canada is very interesting. So it's going to depend. It's going to depend a lot of what the UK wants to do. Does it want to become a sort of vassal state of the United States, or does it want to go back to Europe? They will not be sovereign. That's very clear. So they either stay with them or with us. My point is, if they decided to stay with them, then for us, this will be a question. Where do we stay? I'm saying it's not clear we'll stay in Europe. For me, I would vote to stay in Europe, but given that, what is the Portuguese identity? What's enshrined in the Portuguese identity and our history? We were never an European country. Never. Even me now, I'm a law professor. I was thinking coming here to Italy this year, I spend most of my time either in Brazil, in Mozambique, in Cape Verde. That happens to a lot of people in Portugal. The invitations that we get are always the Portuguese-speaking space in the Atlantic mostly. And that has a profession. Our migration, we got 1 million people in the last 4 years. From where? Portuguese-speaking country, not from Europe. This has an impact in the end where you decide who you are, right? We don't see, of course, we do see some people from Europe, rich people from Europe coming, but people to work on, it's always from, of course, we do have a lot of people coming to Central Europe to work. So that's why I started to reflect on this, which is interesting in the sense that in the end it will be for the people to decide. But again, what I see things going forward is, and I don't see the debate on that, is that we are probably heading this way. And I see a perfect storm forming for us, because when you have to make these kind of decisions, they're very problematic. You cannot have both ways. That's what I'm saying. This perfect world that we had is coming to an end. And I think it's irreversible. But then it depends. It depends on how Europe projects itself. So it's super interesting, right? If we project ourselves growing and not to Canada, to other places, then to the United Kingdom, then there will be no issue. But if things don't go that way, I don't know what's your I don't know if you understand my problem.
Well, it's understand very well. It's the problem from a Portuguese perspective. I also understand that probably Portugal doesn't have much leverage in determining what will go on in Europe, because from a military perspective, it's not that significant. And if there is some initiative in European defense, will probably come from other countries. And Portugal will rather, as you mentioned, join late or just wait and see how it works before taking.
But my question is, can Europe lose the Atlantic, losing Portugal? Can we do that? Because if we lose the Atlantic, then you're basically stuck.
Well, the reality is that anyway.
Greenland.
Yeah. And it's like you mentioned the fact that now with Trump aiming to Greenland, this may be the reason why Greenland may eventually go back to the decision not to be part of the EU, and eventually may decide that they are better off within the EU. There is a debate in
As a
Greenland,
member state,
but
well,
there is a debate even in Canada.
okay, yeah.
That's quite interesting. Okay, we have made the Canada-Europe trade agreement, and that now we have to ratify, and is provisionally implemented in the meantime while waiting ratification. So we are strengthening
Listen,
our relation with Canada, but there is a debate in Canada even about joining the EU as such.
But
That's
that's exactly
amazing.
the point. It's amazing, but it makes perfect sense because for the Canadians understand that to preserve their independence from the United States, they need to join something as big as the United States. It makes perfect sense. That's why, and people realize that in the opinion polls. They know, they understand that. They don't want to be the 51st state. They rather stay in a confederal union of states than becoming part of a federal state. I agree. That's why I think Portugal should be part of the European Union and not part of the United States. But because the political form is different, I don't like the idea of European state for that specific reason. And Canada is the perfect example. They want to retain more sovereign powers than to go inside the Eurostate where they would lose it mostly.
Yeah. Also, it's very difficult to think about Canada as a 51st state because Canada is as big as the United States and is already a federation in its own right,
Yeah, sure,
with its own members that are called provinces, but are as big as the United States member states or the European Union member
Yeah,
states.
but the simple fact that we are discussing this is telling, right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, but this also shows how the geopolitical transformation may bring forward the issue of European defense, notwithstanding the resistance from member states that we've been discussing this morning, also in the joint session with the University of Bologna and the people from the Commission and the Parliament, that were all pointing out to the fact that member states are not really willing to walk the walk regarding European defense. They are talking about it, but they are not actually doing it. And this is very interesting, the fact that this geopolitical turmoil may create an identity crisis in a member state that may even eventually bring it to leave the union, or on the other hand, to stay on the basis of what the union does precisely on this matter. So that's quite an interesting topic also, because in the past, the reason to join or to leave were essentially economics.
No, this is not a problem. This is not a issue.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much. I don't see any question here, so we can close this final session for this conference. Thank you so much for the people here in Overdrato, to the people connected. Of course, all the recording will be available on Euractiv Italy and social media. We thank all our media partner, and we hope that you all enjoy these 2 days of debates about the future of Europe from the Jean Monnet Center of Excellence, fEUture from eCampus University. Thank you so much.
Thank you.